The UN voted at the end of November 1947 to partition Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab. The Jews got the best of it. More than half the country, even though they owned around 10% of the land, and there were twice as many Arabs. The Palestinian Arab leadership rejected the plan straight away. This was not going to be settled by diplomacy. There had been violence between Jews and Arabs before the partition plan, but it escalated fast after the vote. Within a week, there was a civil war.
Welcome back to Hardball. We're back with the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter. His new book is called Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid.
There's no doubt that within the occupied territories, Palestinian land, that there is a horrendous example of apartheid. The occupation of Palestinian land, the confiscation of that land that doesn't belong to Israel, the building of settlements on it, the colonization of that land, and then the connection of those isolated but multiple settlements, more than 200 of them, with each other by highways on which Palestinians can't travel, and quite often where Palestinians cannot even cross. So the persecution of the Palestinians now under the occupied territories, under the occupation forces, is one of the worst examples of human rights deprivation that I know. What is being done to the Palestinians now is horrendous in their own territory by the occupying powers, which is Israel. They've taken away all the basic human rights of the Palestinians, as was done in South Africa against the blacks. And I make it very plain in this book that the apartheid is not based on racism, as it was in South Africa, but it's based on the desire of a minority of Israelis to acquire land that belongs to the Palestinians and to retain that land, and then to exclude the Palestinians from their own property and subjugate them so that they can't arouse and demonstrate their disapproval of being robbed of their own property. That's what's happening in the West Bank. And the people in this country, in America, never know about this. They never discuss this. There's no debate about it. There's no criticism of Israel in this country. And in Israel, there is an intense debate about the issues in this book. In this country, no.
I agree. I mean, I wish we had that sort of debate that they're having in Israel. I wish we had that in the United States. But give us a sort of sense, how much of the responsibility for the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, do you think belongs to the Israelis for their tactics like seizing land and occupying territory that didn't belong to them? How much of it is the responsibility of the Palestinians for their suicide terror attacks and their bombings within Israel proper?
Well, as a matter of fact, the basic cause of the conflict is a sustained occupation of other people's land by the Israelis. And this is a direct violation of United Nations resolutions. It's a direct violation of the International Quartet's roadmap. It's a direct violation of the commitments that leaders of Israel have made in the past at Camp David when I was president and in Oslo, promising that Israel would withdraw from occupied territories. They have failed to do so.
Does Israel bear any responsibility for the exodus of Palestinians in 1948, for the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, of Arabs? Is that true?
No.
When we spoke to President Peres of Jerusalem, he said that Israel bears no responsibility whatsoever for the exodus of Palestinians.
No responsibility whatsoever. Then what caused the exodus to happen? It was the Israeli massacre of villagers, of people whom they encountered. I can count to you scores of massacres which happened all over the country.
Now, it's one of the main reasons for America's support of Israel. And later on today in Washington, a group called AIPAC will hold its annual policy conference. Among the speakers will be the US Vice President and the Israeli Foreign Minister. But what is AIPAC? It is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, a pro-Israel lobby group aimed at pressuring politicians into maintaining close relationships. It was set up shortly after Israel's foundation and now has over 100,000 members, though not all of those are Jewish. It's regularly ranked as one of the top 3 most powerful pressure groups in Washington. Indeed, the New York Times calls it the most important organization affecting America's relationship with Israel. And it's credited with winning billions of dollars in US aid for Israel, and that includes the latest weaponry. From Washington, Rob Reynolds reports.
For decades, AIPAC has been acknowledged as one of the strongest lobbying groups in Washington.
Very influential, mainly because they have the grassroots operations. When a candidate arrives on Capitol Hill, he already knows AIPAC. He knows AIPAC because he met the AIPAC activists in his home state. He knows what it means to be pro-Israel.
In the past 2 election cycles, pro-Israel groups gave over $9 million to congressional candidates, with slightly more than half going to the Democrats. AIPAC does not make direct campaign contributions, but spends millions of dollars on professional lobbyists and paying for lawmakers' trips to Israel. It's all perfectly legitimate, according to Massey Rich, an analyst for the Center for Responsive Government.
The pro-Israel interest group is the most powerful among foreign interests that wants contact with the federal government. Certainly, if you're ranking Americans involved in pursuing a foreign government's and country's interest, Israel outranks them all. Members of Congress have traveled to Israel in the last 2 years more often than they've been to Chicago in our own country. It is the most traveled foreign destination for members of Congress.
Iran will be the #1 issue at this year's AIPAC conference.
We're going to hear a lot about the danger of a nuclear Iran. Thousands, over 5,500 members of AIPAC will go up lobbying on Capitol Hill Tuesday, asking for legislation that will toughen sanctions against Iran.
No, not because of the lobby. Yes, because of the lobby.
In the United States, the power of the pro-Israel lobby is a sensitive topic. When a pair of university professors named John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt published a paper last year suggesting the pro-Israel lobby's power distorted American foreign policy, they were strongly attacked and labeled anti-Semites.
It may be hard to believe, but working in this tiny internet cafe in Gaza City may just be one of Barack Obama's biggest fans. Before every US primary, 23-year-old Ibrahim Abu Jayyab gathers 17 of his friends to try and rally support for Obama's campaign in the US. So why does a young Palestinian living in Gaza spend so much time and money on an election happening thousands of miles away?
It all started at the time of the US primaries. After studying Obama's electoral campaign manifesto, I thought this is a man that's capable of change inside America. As for a potential change in the Middle East, he can also do that. I think he can bring peace to the area, or at least this is what we hope.
And the game plan? Ibrahim and friends call random numbers in the US before every primary to deliver one simple message.
Elect Senator Obama. I will change, I will achieve the justice in Middle East.
What do you hope to achieve today, Mr. President?
But peace in the Middle East is exactly what President Bush has recently claimed is his goal. After largely ignoring the Palestinian issue for most of his time in office, there's been a revival in interest in the last year to try and find a solution to the conflict. But efforts like the Annapolis conference last November have so far failed to show any results on the ground. And America's apparent lack of willingness to apply pressure on Israel to abide by its commitments, such as dismantling illegal settlements and checkpoints in the occupied West Bank, has led Palestinians to seriously question whether any US administration will truly be committed to a just settlement.
Many of my students are following up, what's happening in the U.S. They're following up U.S. primaries. But it seems to me that they are detached because they believe that whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president in the White House, it's not going to make a big difference with regard to the Palestinian issue.
In Gaza especially, where Hamas is in control, there's a real sense of frustration over U.S. policy. Mohammed says he's seen US presidents come and go, but it's always the same old story. Unless you support Israel, you won't get into the White House, he argues. But despite the difference in opinion as to whether or not a change in the American administration will make any difference to Palestinians still living under Israeli occupation, there does seem to be one thing people here agree on. Shireen Tadros, Al Jazeera, Gaza.